The inserted clip from American Muslims Fact versus Fiction that follows presents fiction as fact. It is a false propaganda. The actual word found in the Quran for terrorism is not irjaf, which means earthquake, but irhab or rugba is used in the Quran. Arugba can be seen used in Surah 8:12. Sa'alka fi qulub alladhin kafaru arugba. I will instill terror into the hearts of the unbelievers. There is clearly evident crookedness in the spokesperson's words and explanation.
Again, are these negative perceptions fair? The extremists quote from the Quran. Isn't terrorism in the Quran?
The Quran does speak about terrorism, but it uses a very specific word. In Arabic, it's called irjaf. And this word irjaf means crooked action to instill fear and violence in people, but that fear and that violence is based on hypocrisy. So according to the Quranic paradigm, terrorism or extremist behavior is really an acting out of hypocrisy.
On watching this clearly misleading presentation over a crucial point from the Unity Productions Foundation, a question arises. Why would such a benign-looking Muslim spokesperson, one who does not come across as a radical or extremist in demeanor, go to such an extreme to mislead so blatantly with respect to such a key matter? He craftily states untruths that can easily be checked by anyone who knows Arabic and by anyone who is familiar with what the Arabic Quran actually states and reveals. The video from the Unity Productions Foundation skillfully blends fact and elements of truth with propagandized sly fiction at key points that misrepresent truths stated in the Quran. Terrorism, Islamism, racism, and political correctness. The light of the Arabic Quran has ignited fires of terrorism and inspired racial prejudice. Islam's religious leaders and Islamic believers subscribe to a jihad. They strive to misinform. They craftily and adroitly exploit Western modern desires to be inclusive, tolerant, polite, and politically correct. Misinformation begins with the language of the Quran, Arabic. In English, the word propaganda has a negative connotation. In Arabic, the word generically used for propaganda, da'wah, doesn't. This can lead to misunderstanding. Da'wah is rooted in da'a, which can mean to call, invoke, pray, summon, invite, etc., as seen in Surah 17:110. It says, quote, "Say, call upon Allah, or call upon Ar-Rahman, by whatever name ye call upon him." One of Allah's names is so rooted also as Ad-Da'iyah, the caller. Surah 57:8 has the messenger using the root to invite someone to Islam. Surah 40:10 displays the missionary sense of the word also. Readers can begin to appreciate how Islamic propaganda in Arabic is thus missionary outreach without the negative connotation. Propaganda can be peaceful, provocative, or pugnacious, so we need more precise terms in Arabic when the negative connotation from English is to be kept. When we consider in the English sense the propaganda being used by Islamic believers, there is a need to speak of missionary-style peaceful propaganda versus provocative and pugnacious propaganda. We hear from believers that true Islam is neither violent nor racist. Is that true? If you say it is, you are labeled Islamophobic. We hear these denials from believers. These rote pushback denials from believers, in the face of clear evidence, can only be seen as supporting tall tales and mythic propaganda. In Arabic, riwayat al-makhila wa asatir wa talfikat. They are denials that shield more pugnacious propaganda and other deeds that provoke and or incite violence. At-tahrid. Repeated Islamic violence is on record. There is no denying the incidents that keep accumulating. A July 7, 2016 article titled, quote, Terrorism, Democracy and Social Media, Thoughts on the Recent Terrorist Attacks in Bangladesh stated, quote, this year, Bangladeshi gay rights activist Hultaz Manan and actor Mahbub Rabi Tonmoy were hacked to death with knives. In the same month, 3 masked men armed with machetes attacked a 28-year-old student activist named Nazimuddin Samad after he finished a college law class. And a university English professor, A.F.M. Razul Karim Siddiq, was hacked to death while on his way to work. 5 secular bloggers were killed in a similar fashion during 2015, unquote. That record of violence in contemporary times just keeps growing. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. Take Beirut 1983. Quote, on the morning of October 23, 1983, a dump truck packed with an estimated 12,000 pounds of explosives crashed through the front grates of the U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut. The detonation ripped the 4-story building from its foundation, and the barracks imploded in a matter of seconds. The 241 Marines and sailors killed in the explosion represented the largest loss of life in a single day for the Marine Corps since the Battle of Iwo Jima in 1945, unquote. Let's move to Beirut 2015. Quote, a day before some French attacks, 2 suicide bombers had killed 43 people and wounded 239 more in the Lebanese capital in an ISIS-propagated murder. Beirut's proximity to ISIS-held territory in neighboring Syria, paired with a history of violence, has numbed many overseas watchers to the horrors of terror attacks in Lebanon, unquote. June 28, 2016 article titled Brexit and the Future of Islam. In the eyes of believers and sympathizers, most likely would be seen as nothing less than a bad-mouthing Islamophobic rant. The article said, quote, how can it be fear-mongering when Islamic law is already a reality for nearly a quarter of the world's population, and 85 Sharia courts operate parallel to the British legal system? A recent ICM poll showed that 23% of British Muslims support the introduction of Sharia law to replace British law. Multiculturalism cannot be a one-way street whereby Westerners are forced to dilute their identity and surrender their sovereignty while Muslim communities segregate themselves and impose a purist interpretation of Islam on everyone. Wallah, by Allah, if you disbelieve in democracy, secularism, nationalism, as well as all the other garbage and ideas from the West, and rush to your religion and creed, then, by Allah, you will own the earth, and the East and the West will submit to you, unquote. This is taken from Islam and the Clash of Civilization, Chapter 37, The Axis of Jihad. Western democracy has legislated principles of inclusion and tolerance. They seem merely to be a tool or mechanism that can be exploited by Muslims to pave the way for Islamic expansion. A critic of Muslim actions in this regard noted that many Muslims moved to more open Western societies to escape the oppressive aspects of life within Darul Islam in Muslim countries. Then, they seek post-haste to want to reimpose the same bases of Muslim outlooks they left. They are, in a sense, saying, give us our freedom to do as we want as Muslims now we are here, but otherwise, freedom, you can go to hell. It also seems that any who find such attitudes to be unreasonable are labeled as Islamophobic and hatefully anti-Muslim. The images here speak for themselves. The reality is, the Islamic way of life at base doctrinally endorses slavery, the opposite of an antithesis of freedom. Islam prides itself on being a total way of life. It is not a sum of parts that can be selected at will as one wants. A 2003 authority noted, quote, slavery is a part of Islam, slavery is a part of jihad, and jihad will remain as long as there is Islam. Whoever says that such a thing is abolished as slavery is merely an infidel. Surah 1849 says, and thy Lord or God will not treat anyone or any individual with injustice. وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا jihadan. However, the record shows that it was the doing of Muslims, their deed, that brought the scourge and injustice of color racism with prejudice to the world. Surah 78:29 reminds, and all things have we preserved on record. Wa kulla shay ahsaynahu kitaban. The reality is also Islamic propaganda regarding racial equality in and under the Islamic way of life is mythic. Dirayat al-makhila wa asatira wa talfikat. Surah 371 is perhaps instructive. Why do ye clothe truth with falsehood and conceal the truth? Lam talbasuna al-haq bil-batil wa taktimuna al-haq. And Surah 17:14 says, read thine own record. Sufficient is thy record this day to make out an account against thee. The noxious elements and deeds of Muslims under the Islamic belief system are not lost to history. In the 14th century, Muslim scholar and judge Ibn Khaldun wrote his Introduction to History, or Muqaddimah. In it he said that blacks were, quote, cattle, as we have long stated, unquote. African blacks and their progeny were taken under Islam to be animals. If they served their Muslim masters faithfully, there was hope for them to become redeemed, even though they remained subhuman creatures. They became chattel under Muslim dominion as things, household goods, and belongings. Riyash wa amtiya. In Islam's first 1,000 years, clearly this was the determination Islam's learned, like Ibn Khaldun and others, saw as a truism. Here is an interesting note from the book Slavery and Muslim Society in Africa by Alan Fisher. Quote, we take note of 20 tall Negroes in turbans walking near the Kaaba. They are eunuch slaves and are employed as police in the Great Mosque. There are about 50 of them altogether, unquote. The light of the Arabic Quran inspired racial prejudice in Surah 3:118 presents clear proof, al-bayanat. By one translation it says, quote, O people who believe, do not share your secrets with others. They do all they can to ruin you. They desire the maximum harm for you, unquote. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, la tatakhidhu bitanatan min dunikam, la ya'lunakam khabalan. This and other readily available translations in English and other languages mislead readers about what this verse truly says and conveys. Continuing with Surah 3:118 so that readers may understand, we have three highlighted words in white. The Arabic words with bitanatan referring to wombs in a sexual sense, and ya'alunakum referring to your colors, your skin colors. Then khabalan refers to being deranged, mad, insane, and doing something that would be very, very bad. Again, so that readers may further understand, what this verse reveals clearly to readers in the Arabic language comes across in a very bigoted and exclusionary manner. It refers to sexual and intimate relations. Its injunction betrays an Islamic racial bias that is rooted in prejudice based on color discrimination. It conveys this overall message clearly. Oh, you who believe, you would be deranged, mad, and insane to have sexual relations with outsiders, or take into your wombs those who are not of your color and kind. Do not mix up and confuse your skin colors. Doing such a crazy thing as that would make your racial pedigree impure, betraying your faith and Allah's favors to you. The Arabic Quran is Islam's most revered symbol. It anchors everything. The Arabic Quran says, quote, it is the book that makes things clear, unquote. Surah 3:118 shows how translations are all deficient in full meaning. A reader can now appreciate this better, hopefully. Look at this verse in the Arabic Quran online at tanzil.net. There are wide variances in English translations there that are eye-opening. None use the words color, womb, or insane, or deranged, words that are clearly evident in the original Arabic text. The Arabic Quran is available also as a useful software study tool from the Ghirr project. Ghirr runs on Windows and Linux operating systems. There are several translation plugins. Ghirr has a good Arabic root search function. A search for color in the Arabic, lawn, returns 9 hits. Surah 3118 is not among those hits, it is absent. A search under the advanced function for the English word color using the British spelling which the software uses also results with Surah 3118 not showing up. This may just be an oversight or design flaw in the software. However, this omission in Ghirr also definitely stands out when one considers the wide variances from the Arabic in translations that can be seen in the English at tanzil.net. In the book Islam and the West, Bernard Lewis noted the difficulty of the Arabic language. He devoted a chapter to translation from Arabic. After noting that, quote, classical Arabic is a precise and accurate vehicle of thought, unquote, Professor Lewis ends the chapter saying, quote, the English language we have is adequate to the purpose of translation and should allow the translator to discharge his or her duty to present the text in clear and accurate language within the context of the world from which it came, unquote. His opinion and observation here is on point. It is worth noting nonetheless that in 2 earlier works, Race and Color in Islam and Race and Slavery in the Middle East, Professor Lewis wrongly absolved Islam of generating and fostering color prejudice. He said that the Quran expresses no racial or color prejudice. Professor Lewis abetted Islamic deception since the Arabic Quran, quote, is a precise and accurate vehicle of such racist thought, unquote. There is a grand fallacy that has become ingrained in the learned discourse of Western societies. An example is in Slavery and the Origins of Racism, found in the International Socialist Review, issue 26, from 2002, quote, racism is a particular form of oppression. It stems from discrimination against a group of people based on the idea that some inherited characteristic such as skin color makes them inferior to their oppressors. Yet the concepts of race and racism are modern inventions. They arose and became part of the dominant ideology of society in the context of the African slave trade at the dawn of capitalism in the 1500s and 1600s, unquote. Lance Selfer, the author, he and many others are mistaken. Concepts of race and racism are not modern inventions. Color racism with prejudice came from Islam in the 7th century. Color racism and prejudice as we know it was birthed in the Middle East under Islam. The Holy Quran and Islam generated color racism with prejudice starting in the 7th century. There is clear, convincing, and indisputable evidence, al-bayinat, of this in the historical record of Islam. In more modern times, following the Western Renaissance, the sly, clever, and cunning conservators of Islam, Haras al-Islam, found a convenient scapegoat in white Western Europeans. Muslims then successfully shifted the blame for the creation of color racism and prejudice onto the shoulders of white Western Europeans. That attribution, although erroneous, retains ongoing currency. It was largely enabled by white European actions towards African blacks and their descendants under colonialism and imperialism. In reality, the light of Islam arrived on the African continent first. The Quran came before Europeans brought their Bible. Islamic believers then initiated the debasement and exploitation of Africa's black people as lowly animals, as Muslim judge, scholar, and sociologist Ibn Khaldun confirmed. A bond built on deception, dodges, and contrivances links Islamic racism to Islamic terrorism. Muwalasa wa mudaja wa murawaka. Islamic terrorism and Islamic racism have resorted to like-minded processes of deception to mislead both believers and outsiders. When outsiders strive to be polite, tolerant, inclusive, and politically correct, they more often than not display their ignorance of Islam at its root, a root which is firmly grounded in the Arabic Quran. The Arabic Quran, voiced by Muhammad, is taken to be the, quote, miraculously beautiful, inimitable word of God, unquote. What was said within the Quran in the 7th century remains as valid to believers today as it did then. It bounds them to accept and act upon its revelations and teachings as a set in stone, unchangeable word of God. The Arabic Quran cannot be reformed. But this is the not to be gotten around fact that leads believers onto a path of deception. Rooted in the Arabic Quran, the Islamic belief system has, embedded at its core, a theocratic determinism and a theocratic totalitarianism. In a 1996 issue of Islamic Horizons, a former German diplomat who became Muslim spoke insultingly of black being beautiful. Murad Hoffman was merely continuing a tradition of dislike, revilement, and hatred for blacks. Al-Baghdad min afwahihim. It can be found across the record of Islam historically. Murad Hoffman reminded also that, quote, Islam is a religion with global aspirations, and the absence of Islam in the rest of the world is seen as merely a temporary situation, unquote. In his clearly written comments with racism in mind, former diplomat Murad Hoffman also pointed the way that linked racial prejudice in Islam to terrorism in Islam. Aside from a racist outlook, the reach for global dominance spearheaded by the Arabic Quran has a message, a dhikr or zikr, that endorses the use of terrorism as a means of outreach, no matter any and all denials from any and all quarters. Language from the Arabic Quran is clear, precise, and pointed with respect to both the racism and terrorism that is present in Islam textually, doctrinally, and historically. The books here assess and offer solutions for the theocratic determinism and theocratic totalitarianism found in Islam that leads to the Islamic terrorism we see today. All of the authors project to some degree parallels between radical Islam, Soviet totalitarianism, and Nazism. In The Closing of the Muslim Mind by Robert Riley, Chapter 8 has 4 subsections worthy of review. Islamism as ideology, the foundation of hatred, the evil of democracy, and terrorism as a moral obligation. In one quote he says, quote, the transmogrification of Islam into Islamism is bad news not only for the West but also for the majority of Muslims who have no desire to live in totalitarian theocracies. Quote, for the West, it is but a physical threat in the form of terrorism, unquote, said Pakistani journalist Ayaz Amir. Quote, for the world of Islam, to be trapped in bin Ladenism is to travel back in time to the dark ages of Muslim obscurantism. It means to be stuck in the mire which has held the Islamic world back. Internal quote and total quote. Historically, the light of Islam resulted in Africa's black people being reviled by Muslims as lowly animals. A March 9, 2016 article, What It Means to Me to Be Unapologetically Muslim, stated this, quote, as a black American Muslim, I'm not challenged with the belief that America is not my country and I don't belong. However, being black in America has taught me something unique about being unapologetically Muslim. Historically, black communities have done much to empower black people to love ourselves, our features, and our culture for what it is and how it evolves from the Black Power movement. The model of unapologetically black has given me a confidence to be unapologetically Muslim as well. I heard a saying from a Muslim scholar that says, quote, that which is done from Allah, God, will last. That which is done for other reasons will be obliterated, unquote. Black Muslim Malcolm X was a freedom fighter and famed leader of America's Black Power movement. He was misled, duped, and deceived under the Islamic belief system. In 1964, Malcolm X praised Islam. He did so as a means of chastising America and the West for their continuing racist action. He praised Islam for its equality. In his push for civil rights, Malcolm had said that all people share a desire for the same objective. Quote, that objective is freedom, justice, equality. All of us want recognition and respect as human beings, unquote. Unfortunately, Malcolm X was unaware that the cancer of racism sprang from the very religious system which he was approving, and that freedom is not as highly prized under the Islamic belief system. Ignorance more than foolishness has clouded minds and captured the hearts of many learned Westerners and non-Arabs who would be embarrassed to admit that they had been indeed duped for so long into attributing the creation of color racism to Western whites. Malcolm X was not alone in having been misled, duped, and deceived under the Islamic belief system. On April 3, 1964, in a speech, The Ballot or the Bullet, Malcolm X stated, quote, "Join any organization that has a gospel that's for the uplift of the black man. And when you get into it and see them pussyfooting or compromising, pull out of it because that's not black nationalism. We'll find another one," unquote. The inverse to his comments cannot be overlooked. Why would you join, submit, or continue to bow to an organization or belief system that had originated your debasement? Why would you do that to a system which had set out to destroy your fundamental human rights and which called you cattle and termed you not to be human, only by way of ignorance or continuing folly and stupidity, all the same word in Arabic, al-jahl. Malcolm X was undoubtedly unaware that Islam had effectively stripped blacks of respectful recognition as human beings. Like many others, he had not closely investigated or researched the historical record of Islam. Granted that much of it is in Arabic. When one considers what he said that follows below, it remains clearly to be seen how he had been duped by Islam. Malcolm X once said that, quote, "No God, no religion, no nothing," unquote, would stop him from confronting the purveyors of color racism and prejudice. Many modern Muslims and their sympathizers, similar to Malcolm, seem to be unaware of the hidden history of Islam as it pertains to color and racial prejudice. Jalasa al-Islam al-Qtad, Islam and Islamic believers lie on a bed of thorns. In the book Surrender, Appeasing Islam, Sacrifice and Freedom, the author drew from John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, quote, "Over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign," unquote. Further quotations, quote, "Unless an individual has the freedom to think for himself and speak his mind, the freedom to make his own life choices, and to form and enjoy his own tastes, and the freedom to associate with others, he cannot be called truly free. The only legitimate justification for limiting his freedom, moreover, is to prevent him from harming others," unquote. Tabi'uni bi'ilm in kuntum sadiqina. Is the peace and tranquility Islam and Islamic propaganda promises to deliver not marred by the thorns of unprovoked violence we see daily worldwide? Shawka fi Islam? Does Islam have a long historical record of color racism and prejudice or not? La ya'alunakam khabalan. A July 5, 2016 article. ISIS warning, Dhaka attack will repeat and repeat and repeat until Sharia goes global. Quote, "And what you witnessed in Bangladesh yesterday was just a glimpse. This will repeat and repeat and repeat until you lose and we win. And the Sharia is established throughout the world, and you will never be able to stop it," unquote. In concluding this presentation, Western democracy has legislated principles of freedom, inclusion, and tolerance. They seem merely to be a tool or mechanism that can be exploited by Muslims to pave the way for Islamic expansion. There is no dearth of Muslims from the belief system's reported 1.7 billion followers who want to assist Americans and other non-believing Westerners to get to understand Islam as they see it, but often not as reality records it. In January 2015, after the assault on the offices of Charlie Hebdo in Paris, more excuses, talk, and debates flourished once again. Here, from a Muslim debate, quote, "But we can't exonerate the West for its insulting of the Prophet. I'm not justifying what happened, but these are causes," unquote. Sheikh Ashraf Saad, an official from Al-Azhar, the state-run Egyptian institution that is one of the most prestigious centers of Sunni Islam, said, quote, "Just as we condemn extremists, we must also condemn these freedoms that have reached the point of insulting the Prophet," unquote. He was countered by a Saudi journalist on the panel, quote, "But the question is, why is it Muslims who get so angry and kill and blow things up? The French magazine insulted the Pope, the Dalai Lama. Why do we express our anger in this way?" Unquote. Surah 6, 143 has an intriguing comment. Tabi'uni bi'ilm in kuntum sadiqina. Inform me with knowledge if you are truthful. Examples of thorns from Islam. Min ash-shawkat fil Islam.